The opinions expressed by Peter Wexler, Robert Quittner, Kyle Plotkin, Michael Hart, Nicholas Hamner, and guests on this show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of this network. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Past performance cannot be used as an indicator to determine future results. Any strategies mentioned may not be suitable for everyone. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. Before acting on any information mentioned, please consult with a qualified tax or investment advisor to determine if it is suitable for your specific situation. This program is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information with regard to the subjects covered. Investment advisory services offered through Brookstone Capital Management LLC, aka BCM, a registered investment advisor. BCM and Franklin Retirement Solutions are independent of each other. Insurance products and services are not offered through BCM but are offered and sold through individually licensed and appointed agents. Welcome to this week's episode of Solving the Retirement Puzzle. I am Nick Hamner, as I am every week. Haven't changed yet. With me, as always, this week, Kyle Plotkin, Michael Hart. That should be enough time for the interstitials to go up, and then we can pan back to me. Transition back to me.
Interstitials.
That's the little crawlers. I call them interstitials. I don't know the technical term.
The
ticker.
No, the
Okay.
ticker constantly
the
moves.
Chiron? Is it the Chiron?
Maybe. Bugs. Title bars. But interstitials are the full cards, like what Frasier used to use, what Clerks used, what Adult Swim used, the little
Gotcha.
word cards. Those are
Gotcha.
interstitials, but I don't know a better name for them. Anyway, this week,
Too many
as we
thought
do,
bubbles.
I feel like all our thought bubbles would be blank. By this point in the
maybe
morning,
your thought bubbles.
at this point in the morning, yeah. Those 5 o'clock wake up times, yeah. Empty thought bubbles. But as we do every week, we're going to talk about retirement and income planning news because we are retirement and income planners. We are all with Franklin Retirement Solutions, a retirement income planning firm in Horsham, PA, servicing Montgomery and Bucks and Philadelphia counties. And if you have any retirement questions, that's what we're here for. So you can send those our way at 215-657-9200 or info@franklinrs. And today is a very interesting day. It happens every year. I'm not just talking about the date. August 27th is when we're recording this. What's the significance of today? Do you guys know?
Is it the final day for the NFL rosters?
Yes, this is NFL Cut Day. This is where all the guys who claimed everybody was doubting them prove everybody right because they're getting cut. This is the day NFL rosters head down to 53 men. So a lot of guys, a lot of names you've never heard of and a couple that you have are going to end up unemployed by the end of the day. And that's something that's on the mind of a lot of people, not just in the NFL, but you've got corporations announcing layoffs as they do every quarter to try to meet that deadline, make themselves look profitable. But as often happens, it's the older workers that are getting cut. It's the newest and the oldest that typically get cut. And so if you are in a job where early retirement might be offered, we're going to talk about early retirement for a minute. And what I love is this handout I found. This was produced by someone very clearly with baby boomers in mind, and I'll point out why. It's 6 questions you need to ask yourself if offered early retirement. First one is, are you ready to retire? And there are 3 questions that every retiree asks. Do you have enough financially? Have you had enough? Just, are you ready to follow Johnny Paycheck and holler, take this job and shove it? And then, do you have enough to do? So this first question is, are you ready to retire? Do you know what you're going to do in your retirement years? Do you have your finances set up? Are you done with your job? Would you leave it if you had the chance? Something to consider with early retirement. Now, this one really made me realize this was written with baby boomers in mind and baby boomers only. If you do not accept the buyout, will you lose your job anyway? Many of us like to feel we're bulletproof in jobs we have commanded for several years. No Gen X or no Millennial, no Gen Y, or no Gen Z has ever felt secure in their jobs. Ever. We all realize it's a commodity. But yes, also, are employees being asked to do more than before? Well, that's just capitalism.
Yeah,
We've
is
all,
that like everyday reality?
I mean, as early as 2009, I can remember just, okay, yeah, we went from an office of 5 to an office of 2. That's just the norm. You're going to see 2 jobs converted to 1, converted to 1. It's just it's a funnel downwards. So yeah, but if you do not accept the buyout, will you lose your job anyway? A valid concern. If you feel the company is on the rocks, that the job might not be there anyway, take the money and run. 3, if you accept the buyout but want to continue working, how difficult will it be to find another job? In general, the older you get, the harder it is to find employment. We hear about this all the time. However, depending on your industry, it may be easier than not. Obviously, if you are in a trade that is routinely being outsourced, that's no longer done in America, how much clothing is sewn here anymore? Manufacturing jobs always going overseas. So depending on your job, it may still be difficult. But the older you get, this paper mentions, and they have a couple of sources that make it seem like it's an actual valid thing, including the Wall Street Journal and ZipRecruiter. The demand for older workers is surging, and not just hiring, but maybe hiring for better money. So according to ZipRecruiter, 42% of people that have found a new job got better pay. 37 got similar pay. So only 21% got a pay cut. So even if you do have to find a new job after taking the early retirement package, you might even end up making up more money. Can you retire right now if you take the buyout? This is where retirement planning really comes into play. Do you know the ins and outs of how you're going to do it? Because so many people take an early retirement package and it becomes, how far can your car coast down the hill? You've built the biggest hill possible with your buyout, with your savings. How far can you coast before you're in trouble? But that's where retirement planning really comes into play. And that's where Social Security planning really comes into play. Because that's when you see the statistic. Everybody wants to wait until they reach full retirement age, or wait until they hit their 70. Was it 70 is
70.
the latest anymore?
Mhm.
Wait till they're 70. Get that max bonus for Social Security. But the majority of people file early. The majority of Americans file for Social Security before they reach full retirement age, and not having enough income after losing your job in old age as you get closer to full retirement age, that is the driving factor by why people file early. And so you don't want to file for Social Security until the later date, but it's worth looking into because there is that sliding scale. There is a tiered chart of, okay, at 62 you get this, at 63 you will get this, at 64. But depending on your overall longevity, you may still make out better filing at 62, filing as early as you can.
Well, there is a perfect Social Security strategy.
But
if you tell me exactly the month and year you're going to die, I'll tell you the best way to take Social Security.
Right. But unless you're planning to take matters into your own hands, nobody can really say that. Not even anybody that claims to be a prophet and being able to see the future. Nobody's been right yet. Plenty of end of the world predictions. None of them have been right yet.
Nostradamus is like, batting better than 0 at least.
Well, because hindsight's 20/20.
Or you can just, take words and make them mean what you want.
Absolutely. So back to what I was talking about. We've talked about Social Security playing a part, and when you file, there's still that healthcare hole. If you file for Social Security, if you don't go back to work at 62, you're not getting Medicare until 65. So there's going to be that lull. So can you afford Medicare, or can you afford healthcare if you're not 65 and eligible for Medicare yet?
this article mentions, there's 4 sources. There's Cobra, there's the marketplace, there's private insurance, or your spouse's plan. Of those options, spouse's plan is usually the best, but if you're on your own or if your spouse isn't working, it's time to really have a discussion and really look out for filling that healthcare hole. That's where you really want to look at the ACA, see what is offered in the exchange. Remember, you're going to get some kind of supplement if your income is 4 times poverty level or below. And if you get a silver plan, you may be eligible for additional savings. So that's always something to look at. That's part of healthcare planning. That's part of your overall retirement plan. That's one of the things we do here.
I've seen scenarios while we're on this. There have been cases where, say, somebody loses their job, I don't know, 62, 63, and rather than claiming Social Security, they do have enough cash to live on for a year or two in order to get, free or reduced health care via the ACA. I've seen scenarios where, maybe you wait another year or two to claim in order to get that reduced health care. So it obviously is very dependent on your specific situation and scenario. But there are a lot of different ways you can play it once you get there.
Right. And then this last one, what are the tax consequences of a buyout? Depending on how your early retirement plan is structured, how long the payments may come out, you may suffer a tax hit if you take the lump sum. Contradicting that, though, is if you're worried about the company going under, if you're being offered early retirement as a way for them to stave off a total loss, you may not want to get it in an installment plan because you might not see that second installment. So it is one of those things, if you are offered an early retirement package, the worst thing you can do is not ask for more information. Get every bit of information you can possibly get. And then if you're not comfortable making all those decisions, that's something where you really want to talk with your financial planner. If you don't have a financial planner, if you don't have someone really helping you with your retirement plan, you need to find one. And so that's why we're here. That's why we do this podcast, so you know what to look for. And if you'd like to reach out to us with a question about this, or you've been offered early retirement, give us a call at 215-657-9200. Reach out to us at info@franklinrs.com. And while we're talking about retirement planning and workplace retirement plans, Mike, what do you have this week?
Yeah, so kind of 2 things. So I found an article in the Wall Street Journal that talked about, what to do if you're middle-aged and you really haven't started saving for retirement, or you're behind in saving for retirement. And then along with that,
what is considered middle age?
I believe anybody, I think they say 45 to 55.
I am insulted by that designation. Yeah. Let's make it for this year. Let's make that at least 46.
Fair enough. So, and in one of the previous episodes that we had done, I had talked about how if you are in that middle age bracket and you're just now getting started to save for retirement,
46 to 54,
46 to 54,
yes.
Right? That your savings rate you really wanted to strive for was 20%. And I had gotten some pushback on that from some people who had listened to the episode. And so I just wanted to go over, some of the math that gets us to that 20% number. So I looked at, a couple with an income, let's say 46, with an income of $160,000 between the two of them.
Okay.
The general, estimate is that in retirement, you're going to need about 80% of your income. So if we take that number and look at 80%, it's going to be $128,000. You figure that that couple between the two of them is going to get about $44,000 in Social Security. So that brings us to portfolio income needed of $84,000 per year after we, subtract all that stuff out. If your safe withdrawal rate in retirement is 4%, then to get portfolio income of $84,000, your nest egg at retirement needs to be $2.1 million. So if we look at, again, that couple making $160,000 a year, If they save 20% of their gross, that's $32,000 a year. Let's say they both get a 4% match on their 401k. That's an extra $6,400 per year. That brings their total annual contributions to $38,400 per year. Assuming an 8% return, if we do, let's say they're going to retire at 66, so we'll do age 46 since that's middle age now.
Mm.
20 years at 8% gets you to $2.17 million.
Now, are you aware, I probably should have brought this up before you started, that for every numerical figure you introduce into a conversation, every math calculation you'd introduce, audience interest divides by half?
It's probably true.
That's because you can't see the full picture when you're in the frame.
Right.
So you got to zoom out and see everything.
Excellent point. That's
Very
true.
excellent point.
Thank you.
That should be on the pushboard somewhere.
But so 2.1, a little over $2.1 million. So that's where that 20% number comes from. And to some people it might sound crazy, but this is why it's so important to start early and not wait until you're 45 to start.
46.
I apologize. Just to start saving for retirement. And as Nick said, that's what we do here. We help our clients every day. So if you do feel like you're behind on retirement and you're starting to feel that panic creep in, the best day to meet with somebody here is yesterday, but the next best day is today. So
Absolutely. And if you need to set that up, that's what we're here for. 215-657-9200 or info@franklinrs.com. That's 2 of the 3 down. And Kyle, I know you said you could go on for this for a while. You're not going to. So what can you tell us about what you got this week in 7 minutes or less?
Okay. So
6 minutes or less.
6. So that's pushing it.
Okay.
That's like 46 years old.
Yeah.
Yep. So obviously the election is one of the big stories that is happening right now.
there's an election this year?
Now, I should mention this could theoretically be an international show, so we just want to specify the U.S. presidential election in 2024.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes.
Yes. So there's obviously I'm not going to get into a lot of the politics of it, but there's a lot of information that's been floating around about the different economic plans of the different candidates, and just wanted to make a couple of points there and a couple of clarifications, because there's a lot of the information is either just completely false or skewed in one direction or another to fit somebody's agenda. So one of the big things that's gotten a lot of play out there is the no tax on tips thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Trump came out in a speech in Vegas and said no tax on tips, and then Kamala, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks later, said something along the lines of no tax on tips for service workers. Overall, the general consensus that I've been reading on this is that it's not good policy either way. Sure, it sounds great that, okay, if you're a server or somebody, a hairdresser, you work on a tip structure, you don't want to pay taxes on that. And that's all well and good. I understand. Having waited tables and bartended myself, I can certainly understand that sentiment. Couple things, though. Number one is that automatically puts them in a lower tax bracket over our lower tax rate, effectively, than, let's say, a cook or a dishwasher. Because they're going to have more of their income that's going to be taxed from the W-2 as opposed to the tips where a higher percentage is, theoretically not going to be taxed. So number one, there's an inequality there right off the bat. The other thing, particularly with Trump's proposal, is there's nothing that we've seen that delineates what is a tip, who's a tipped worker, and how that could all be structured. So one of the concerns is there's nothing stopping a hedge fund manager from changing his compensation structure to largely include gratuities or tips.
Well, I mean, if you're using a new cash register anyway, everybody using that cash register is now a tipped employee. Because all of them ask you.
Everywhere.
It's going to ask you a quick question.
Yep.
And then
And they walk away.
That's one of the points, actually, in this one of these articles that I had. I believe this one was this the Kiplingers? No, this one was from the Journal, the Wall Street Journal.
Oh, the Wall Street Journal.
The Wall Street Journal, yes. And so the line in here, tax breaks are supposed to encourage things we like, such as children and home ownership. This one does the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is that nobody really wants to pay tips. Everybody likes
Right.
to get tips. Nobody likes to pay them. And that's, as we've talked about before, an ever-expanding thing, it seems, these days. So that is one of the proposals there, and why, frankly, it's probably not good policy. It sounds good in theory. It probably gets some votes. But at the end of the day, it's A, probably not going to happen, and B, probably not a great idea anyway. Another thing that we've seen is with talking about capping rents, or what we rent control, price controls on things like food. The first thing is nobody is really proposing what we would traditionally call price controls or rent controls, where the government actually says, okay, a pound of bananas is going to be 45 cents and it can't be any higher. Nobody's really saying that. The reason why that's been coming up is obviously inflation has been taking its toll for several years now and having a big impact on my life. I'm sure you guys as well and everybody else. But at the same time, one thing that we've seen is corporate profits have gone up
Exponentially.
Exponentially, yes. Thank you, Nick. More so than the prices themselves, which tells you one thing, is that companies are using this as an excuse or as an opportunity to raise their prices.
It's not inflation, it's greed.
That's why the greedflation is one of those new words that gets thrown around.
And then Michael Douglas will come in and tell us that greed is good.
It's a great movie.
So, and back to that point here, trying to stay on topic, Nicholas. Thank you.
Refuse.
Yeah. And so it's what was talked about was price gouging. So not necessarily price controls where, okay, we're going to set this price and a pound of turkey is going to be $7. That's not what it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically going after the companies that are making exorbitant profits above and beyond what they were making prior to all this inflation, say 2018-19. One of the proposals Elizabeth Warren supposedly came up with was on the corporate earnings calls that they have to have every quarter with their investors. The ones that are talking about raising prices just because they can, and there are a lot of them that are doing that. Some kind of penalties there, removing their some of their tax benefits. I don't know if that's a great idea. I think maybe it could work a little bit. It's probably certainly not, an overall solution. But another piece of that too is rents. And people's rents have been going up insane amounts.
Yes.
On people whose rents are going up 30 to 50% in the last 4 or 5 years. And so one of the proposals, and Biden actually said this first, was capping rent increases at 5%. So a lot of the economists are saying, well, that's going to mess with supply and demand, which is what, ultimately affects what pricing on different things, including housing. But I looked into that proposal a little bit more, and it's not necessarily across the board. So the actual, and again, this all has to get through Congress, so chances are none of it's getting done anyway. But the proposal is only for corporate-owned landlords. Mm-hmm. So, like, if you own a bunch of apartments that you rent out individually, that is not included here. So it's the big corporation landlords, and it's in buildings where there's 50 units or more.
Right.
So, like, big apartment buildings in cities owned by a lot of these bigger companies. That's kind of the proposal. I certainly think that's better than, capping, landlord Nick on what he can charge for rent. Is that going to end the problem? I don't know. Probably not. But that's what the proposal is. It's nothing beyond that. So a lot of the bad things kind of get thrown around there. Tariffs is another one. During the Trump administration, they did impose a bunch of tariffs on goods coming from overseas. Ultimately, that did end up
increasing the price of refrigerators about $400.
Is that true?
Just about.
Okay.
If you look at what a refrigerator cost prior, because all it did was it raised the cost of the ones coming from overseas. So the domestic manufacturers were of the opinion, well, if they're going to charge that much, we can charge that much.
Right, because they're not going to eat that tariff.
Right.
They're going to have to pass it on to the consumers who are ultimately going to pay it.
Right.
So there was a Deutsche Bank report so that manufacturing employment deteriorated in the U.S. after those tariffs came into place in 2018. And the Tax Foundation estimates that a 10% tariff across the board would cost about 505,000 jobs. So food for thought. As
I
far
feel like
as that
a
goes.
lot of these are not so much policies they ever intend to see through. It's just more along the lines of, hey, workers impacted by this policy or workers impacted by this. I hear you. Here's an idea I'm going to put out to show that I hear you, even though it has no chance of going through. It's just a symbolic measure to show.
Well, welcome to American elections,
recognition.
where
It's pandering.
It is
Yeah.
absolutely pandering.
yeah, that's why Trump, brought out that one policy in Las Vegas about tipped workers.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do that in Detroit, or some other hub of another industry. It was obviously the center of the tipped service worker industry is probably Las Vegas.
I feel like any candidate who says every minute past the stated wait time before you actually get sat at a restaurant becomes a percentage off your bill sweeps the map.
I'm sure that it would.
Screaming kids have to leave the restaurant, sweep the map.
Yeah, try to get that through Congress.
Yeah, telling people what they want to hear. It's the same as, we're hearing a lot now about potentially, taxing unrealized gains. And the fact of the matter is it's impossible to implement. It would cost more to run a program like that than it would generate in any kind of revenue. It sounds good, right? But it's not realistic.
It's another thing. It's another thing I looked into. That's actually part of the budget that the Biden administration already proposed for 2025, and it would only apply to people with with over $100 million net worth. So it would only apply to like 11,000 people in the entire country.
Well, if you reduce who it applies to, then it becomes easier to implement.
Sure.
Never mind the fact that they all have accounting and legal teams that will bog that up for years.
Right. Well, that's why they buy life insurance to hide taxes. They have shell companies. They move money overseas. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that these wealthy individuals and wealthy families do to avoid paying a lot of those taxes. And I think that, largely, I think across the board, a lot of people say, that's not necessarily fair, or they should be contributing more. And that's a separate argument that we can have.
And I want to
camera
bring that up real quick. For anyone watching who's going to come into our office and say, as many people have come before, I don't want to pay any tax. The only way you get out of legally paying tax is when you have enough money to influence tax policy on the back end. You're not going to manipulate the code to avoid tax on the front end. That's just an uncomfortable reality. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I get asked probably every week, how do I avoid paying taxes on my IRA money?
Commit a felony. Tax evasion's a felony.
Yeah, that unless you want to do a bunch of Roth conversions and write a whole bunch of big checks to Uncle Sam now, there's nothing you can do.
Right, but even then you're paying your taxes. It's just a question of when you're going to pay your taxes.
Exactly right. So that was the one. Another little piece of the capital gains thing, as you alluded to, Mike, was increasing the capital gains rate. Right now, the top capital gains rate's 20%. There's some proposals out there to tie that closer to what your actual income tax rate is. So, for example, the highest income tax rate right now, 39.6. Raising the capital gains tax to, or it was 39.6, right? That's, I think it's 37 now. It was 39.6. Raising the capital gains tax to meet that if you are above $1 million in income in a year. So a lot of these proposals, they would not apply across the board. They would only apply to folks at the upper end of the income or wealth scale. So certainly changes these things. You know, a proposal comes out and you turn on the TV and people are screaming, "Oh, this is going to be a tax increase for the average person and this and that." A lot of these are specific to the higher end. So again,
Well,
a lot
what's
of
the net worth of the people screaming about them?
well, the TV commentators that are
Mhm.
making $20 million a year,
And the network owners who host them?
who donate to the political candidates to get the policy in favor of what they want to make them more money. Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, long story short, there's a lot of information out there. A lot of it's misinformation. A lot of it's incomplete information. So I wish people would do more research as far as the political proposals go and as far as all of this stuff goes. Just beware of what you're hearing is probably not the full story. And even if it is, the person who's giving you that information is likely framing it in a way to benefit one side rather than the other.
Well, when the media has to make a profit, that distorts it immediately.
Well, that's an inherent conflict of interest in the news that we have in this country.
It is.
Yep.
And on that incredibly uplifting note, we're going to call it for the week. So hope you enjoyed watching. Hope you learned something. If you have any questions, any comments, you need some help with anything, that's what we're here for. 215-657-9200. info@franklinrs.com. I'm Nick Hamner. With me this week, as always, has been Michael Hart and Kyle Plotkin, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much for watching.